In this video, we're going to discuss how to deal with square and square root signs when we are transposing. So in this first question here, I have if the square root of a is equal to b, we want to transpose for a. Now the square and square root signs are opposites of each other, meaning if I had the square root of a and I square that square root of a, the square and the square root signs will cancel out each other because they are opposites of each other. So I'll simply remain with a. And likewise, if I found the square root of a squared, again the square root and square are opposites of each other and they would cancel out each other. So again I would get a. So when it comes to this question, the square root of a is equal to b. What we're going to do is square both sides of the equal sign, because what we do to one side of the equal sign, we must do to the other side to keep things balanced. The reason we're going to square both sides is because we want to square the square root so that the square and the square root will cancel out each other and we will remain with a. So I'll square the left hand side to get rid of the square root sign. And what I do to the left hand side, I must also do to the right hand side. So I'll square the right hand side as well. So here the square root and the square would cancel out each other and I'll remain with a. And that will be equal to b squared. And therefore we have transposed for a. So in this question I have m squared is equal to e times v, and we want to transpose for m. Now I have m squared here, so in order to get rid of this square sign, I'll have to take the square root of the m squared, so that the square root and the square would cancel out each other. So whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I must do to the other side to keep things balanced. So I'll take the square root on both sides. So here the square root and the square will cancel out each other and I'll simply get m. And that will be equal to the square root of EV. And that's your answer. You have transposed for m. So in this question we have k is equal to mn times the square root of p, and we want to transpose for p. Now p is under square root sign, so the first thing we're going to do is transpose for the square root of p. So the mn is being multiplied by the square root of p. So when the mn is transferred across the left hand side, the operation will change from multiplication to division and the mn will go under the k. So I'll have k divided by mn is equal to the square root of p. Now that I have the square root of p on one side of the equal sign by itself, I will square both sides to get rid of the square root sign. So now the square root and the square would cancel out each other and I'll remain with p. And applying the laws of indices, I would square the k, the m, and the n. So I'll get k squared over m squared n squared is equal to p. And that's your answer. In this question we have if t is equal to 2 pi times the square root of L over G, we want to transpose for G. So when we look at this question, we are seeing that the L over G is under the square root sign, and we want to transpose for this G here. So the first thing we're going to do is transpose for the square root of L over G. So we have this 2 pi that's been multiplied by the square root of L over G. So when we transfer this 2 pi across the left hand side, the operation will change from multiplication to division, and the 2 pi will go under the t. So we'll have t divided by 2 pi is equal to the square root of L over G. Now that I have the square root of L over G on one side of the equal sign by itself, I would square both sides to get rid of the square root. So the square root and the square would cancel out each other and you'll remain with L over G. And applying the laws of indices, we'll square the t, the 2, and the pi. So I'll get t squared over 2 squared pi squared is equal to L over G. Now I can apply the technique of cross multiplication. So I'll have t squared multiplied by g, and that will give me t squared g. And then I'll have 2 squared pi squared multiplied by L, and that will give me 2 squared pi squared L. Now I'll simply write over this line and work out the value of 2 squared. So I have t squared g is equal to 2 squared, which is 4, pi squared L. Now this t squared is being multiplied by g, so when I transfer this t squared across to the right hand side, the operation will change from multiplication to division, and the t squared will go under the 4 pi squared L. So I'll have g is equal to 4 pi squared L divided by t squared. So in this question, we have E is equal to half mv squared, and we want to make V the subject of the formula, which is the same as transposing for V. So the first thing we're going to do is transpose for the V squared. So this half m is being multiplied by the V squared. So when I transfer this half m across the equal sign to the left hand side, the operation will change to division, and this half m would go under the E. So I'll have E divided by a half m, which is equal to V squared. Now that I have the V squared by itself on one side of the equal sign, I will take the square root on both sides. Reason being, the square root will cancel off the square and I'll remain with V. And whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I must do to the other side to keep things balanced. So now the square root and square would cancel out each other, and I'll remain with V. And I'll remain with the square root of E over half m on this side. Now I can simplify this answer further by bringing this 2 on top, so I'll have 2e, and the 1 will remain below with the m, and 1m is the same as m. So I'll have the square root of 2e over 1m is equal to v. And 1m is the same as m, so that will be the square root of 2e divided by m is equal to v. And that's your answer.